Hello there everyone. In today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to make this wire weave. So this is what it looks like. And what it is, the technique itself is kind of like a figure of 8 wire weave as we're going around one wire through the two, crossing over to the other side, wrapping there and crossing back over. So that's the basic technique. So I've got a tutorial that shows how to do the basic figure of 8 weave that I'm going to link in the description box below. But then it's kind of a variation because instead of having the base wires really close together, we got further apart here, so it gives more spacing, and you get an open weave and also a wrap on every side, so around each base wire more times before we do a crossover to the other side. And then you can get this really nice open zigzag effect with your basic figure of 8 weave basically, and it can end up looking like this. So if you want to learn how to make this weave, then stay tuned. So then the wires that I'm using to demonstrate with here is 2 lengths of my 1mm thickness wire. So it's going to be nice and strong as a base wire here. And then for the weaving wire, I'm using a 0.4mm, and this is going to be perfect to weave around the 1mm base wires. Now what I've just done here then is taken my 2 base wires and added them into a clamp. It's just for easiness to hold them right at the beginning especially, but also it helps keep the distance between the 2 wires equal, so you can also keep moving it. But this is just for easiness. You can use anything really. This is just a spring clamp, so whatever you have that you can use. You can also hold them in your hand if you find that comfortable, but also quite often you might have them already attached to a project. But I'm just going to hold it like this. Then I'm going to take my weaving wire, just going to lay this below, then I'm going to start attaching it first of all. So I'm just going to go around the bottom base wire here on its own, coil it around a few times to attach it. And what I want to do is every time I bring my wire around, I want to push it down as well to make sure every wrap that I do is nice and tight to the previous one. Because that way we get a nice and tight weave here. And then I'm going to go straight in to start making the pattern, because we're not going to be making a specific pattern. Obviously you can see the wires have got a nice distance between them. Usually for most weaves, your wires, base wires, will be right next to each other. So to do this, I'm going to already build up, going straight into the weave here. Now what you might want to do as well is count the amount of wraps that you do. So for instance, I think I've done 5 now. So I might go up to 10 or so. That's 8, 9, 10. And like I said, this is just to demonstrate with. Yours can look completely different. You can do a different amount of wraps there. It all depends on the look that you want and what you're using it for. But then what I'm going to do now is I've done 10 wraps in this case to begin with. I'm going to go around and again down in between the two like I've done the whole time, as if we were doing another wrap, but instead of wrapping around the bottom one, I'm now going to cross over to the other wire, so the top one that we haven't wrapped yet. And I'm going to cross over there, and then what's going to happen, what we need to do is, we've obviously, where we ended up, this last wrap is way further up than over here. And that's actually what we need, because we want our wires to cross over in this zigzag pattern. So what I'm going to do is make sure it gets pushed all the way down to where the beginning of the base wire is, and then wrap around the top wire on its own. So go down between the two again, but just wrapping around the top one. You might just have to hold it a bit to begin with until we get into the weave. Go around again. You can see here what your wires want to do as well. You can see it happening here is as you're weaving, because when you're then kind of pushing and pulling your weaving wire, your base wires are wanting to get closer and closer together. So you want to try and avoid that, unless that's obviously what you're going for. But if you want an even spacing between your base wires all the way, that's where the clamp can also be kind of handy to help if you keep moving it up towards where you're working. So if you're always working close to where the clamp is, you're more likely that your base wires are going to stay where you want them to and not move too close together. But I'm going to wrap around here. So again, what I would personally recommend, if you want to make sure you get your weave nice and even, you need to count your wraps. So I'm just going to make sure that I'm doing that. I've got 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah. So what we need to now do is start deciding exactly how we want it to look. Because remember we did 10 on this side, Again, that's just what I'm demoing. I lost track, let me just count again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's get up to 10. 7, 8, 9, and then the last one, 10. So now we have the same amount of wraps on both sides, and you can see where the wraps stop is also pretty much at the same place up there. But what we actually need is more than the 10 now. So, because we've ended up with here, if we now cross over to this side again, to the bottom again, this crossover, the weaving wire, is going to be straight, and that's not what we want. We want it to make this kind of triangle shape, so go zigzag in this way instead of having some of them come straight across. So that means we need to make more wraps or coils up in the top one still, and usually to get a nice and even weave it will be double the amount that you started out with. So that means I'm going to do another 10, so 20 in total, to get the equivalent out on the other side of this wrap down here. So that means I'm going to count another 10. 1, 2, 3, keep pushing them down. 4, 5, just always taking your weaving wire down in between the two. 6, coiling around your base wire there. 7, almost there. 8, 9, and 10. And as you can see, the further I get out, the more my wires want to kind of pull in towards each other. Just try and constantly be aware of that and keep working against it. Make sure that they stay exactly where you want them to. Especially now, because now what we want to do is cross back over to the bottom base wire again. So where we started out, we want this crossover weaving wire to be. And you can see now it's going to look more, we're going to get this triangle instead of the straight crossover that we would have done before if we hadn't put in those extra wraps. So I'm coming down in between. So instead of wrapping around the same base wire again, I just need to cross over to the other side. So the first base wire, and again come around that. And it's always a good idea, I find, to kind of hold your weaving wire right on the bottom there of your base wire. Hold it in place and also avoid pulling too much on your weaving wire. Come down between the two again and push it down. Make sure you're not pulling too much, because it's the pulling of your weaving wire that moves your base wires closer together. So if you try and avoid pulling too much, that really helps as well. But then always make sure you're pushing your wraps down. So that was 1. So now we're back to just wrapping around the bottom one twice, 3 times. And then basically this is how I'm going to continue now. So I know from the wraps up here that I need 20 in between each crossover to get this even zigzag look. And I think we just lost track. There's 4, I think. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. That's halfway. And again, you can see this is pretty much now level with where the wraps end on the other side, but that's the midpoint of this side. So we want to make sure we continue from here so we get the full 20 wraps, not just the 10. 3, 4, 5, and 6. Push them together. 7, 8, 9, and 10. So that gives 20 in total. And then we're now at a point we know we need to cross over again. So it's ended here. I'm still coming down between the 2 base wires. Instead of going around the same wire, cross over to the other side again to get that angle instead of a straight crossover, to basically pick up on the top base wire where the last wrap ended. Again, make sure what really helps is to hold your finger against it so it stays in the right place. And then instead of pulling, we just want to make sure to just guide the wire rather, to make sure we're not pulling the base wires too close together. And then we're back to wrapping around the top base wire again. making sure you keep that distance. And this is just how you want to keep going basically. So in this case I'm doing the 20 wraps between each crossover. That's just my example. Now you might want to do more or less. It completely depends on, first of all, the look you want, so how open you want these little zigzags or triangles to be, but also maybe how wide a gap you have between the base wires. So just use however many wraps between the crossovers as you want to, and then keep going here, and then I'm going to show you how it can look a bit later on. So then once you keep going for a bit longer, you can end up with something a bit like this. So as you can see, if you especially make sure to count your wraps in between every one here, once you get into it properly, then you can see you get this really symmetrical effect all the way along, because they're all even, because you got an even amount of wraps between every time you do a crossover. So this is what it can end up looking like. So this is just an example of a weave. You can obviously use this for many different things, but I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial and found it useful, and thank you very much for watching. Hello everyone. Today I want to show you how to do this herringbone wire weave, and it looks like this. So you get this really nice effect, where it's this herringbone effect going up and down in rows almost next to each other, and it just builds along the way, however long you want it to. So if you want to learn how to make this, then stay tuned. So what I'm just going to be demonstrating with is 4 lengths of my base wire here. That's a 1mm wire, and this is just